Sydney. I'm in my last semester. I'm a fourth year EEB specialist and also genome bio major. And this is a quick presentation that I and also some members of the EEB course union made up for just like talking about different research experiences, different ways to gain research experience in EEB. Yeah, so just a quick overview. These are just all the different types we'll go over. Again, this presentation should be available online, and so don't worry about like trying to take notes or anything. And yeah, we'll be able to answer questions about all of these afterwards. So the first one that is kind of the easiest type of volunteering or research to get into is volunteering in EEB research labs. These are usually, they're occasionally posted as ads. People will be looking for volunteers, but most of the time you get into volunteering just by directly contacting a professor and saying like, hi, like I'm interested in your research. Do you have volunteer positions? They're unpaid, you don't get course credit. But the benefit is just that, you know, if you have like a couple of free hours a week that you can dedicate to this, it's really great because you get to know professors, you get to know grad students, you get to learn what research is like. And I think most people who volunteer in a lab are usually given the opportunity to like do research courses or like work study afterwards. So it's a good way to get to know people. This is some pictures from, so I volunteered in the lab of Art Weiss when I was in my first year. I was counting a lot of seeds on mustard plants in the greenhouse. And yeah, it was fun though. And at the end of the year, we went with the lab and all of the other volunteers to the ROM to go do the special exhibit. So it was fun to get to know people. Another really common one that people do are ROP courses. So these are offered through the Faculty of Arts and Science. There's a 299 and 399 course. And these are projects where the project description and like the research you're doing is posted in advance and you apply to certain research projects. So you're not like you're not controlling too much of the experiment. It's mostly a preset thing that you apply to. Yeah, and they're really fun. This is my friend Michaela doing an ROP 399 project. Again, with Art Weiss, she started as a volunteer and then went on to do a 399. And these are for course credit. A similar thing that you can do is REP or field courses. So these are really fun. These are where you get to do field research in an off-campus location. Some of them are, you know, like within the GTA, others are just like in other countries. They're usually like an intensive 1 to 3 week course where you're collecting and analyzing your own data. And they're really fun. However, I think most of them have fees on top of regular tuition. There are probably some scholarships available that maybe people can talk about later if anyone has questions about these. There's the REP program, which is offered through Arts and Science. And then also through EEB, you can participate in the Ontario University's program in field biology, OUPFB. So that allows you to do research courses that are offered by other universities in Ontario as well. These are for course credit. And this is my friend Natasha doing an OUPFB that was offered through the University of Guelph up in New Brunswick doing marine science. She was collecting phytoplankton and doing some population genetic stuff on that. Another one that I think a lot of us are really happy to talk about are EEB project courses. So there are a lot of different ones that you can do. There's the third year EEB 397, and then there's 2 fourth year full year courses, which are 498 and 499. And then there's also this fourth year half course, which is 497. So these are independent research. They're projects where, you know, as opposed to the ROP and REP, you actually are responsible for approaching a professor and saying like, hi, like I'm interested in doing research in your lab in a project course. Can we design an experiment together? So you're not applying to a preset experiment. You actually have like control in designing the experiment. Yeah, this half year, fourth year course, is usually more of a literature review. It's usually not much with like doing experiments, but the 397, 498, and 499 are all like you're doing independent research. And they're really fun. This is some pictures from mine that I did where I was collecting a lot of mushrooms and then finding all of the insect eggs that were inside the mushrooms and doing some DNA sequencing. Highly recommend these classes. They're great. Unpaid work, but yeah, you get course credit. And I think a lot of people who are in the EB specialist program go for these because it satisfies one of the sort of main requirements. Yeah, another way you can get involved in research in EEB is as a work study student or as a research assistant. The benefit of these is that they are paid, which is great. You don't get course credit for them. And so the type of work that you would do in a work study is really, really variable depending on like what position you apply for and what lab you're working in. Some of them are just basically like you're washing dishes. Other ones are like you are actually helping with the data collection. So it just depends on like the position you apply for. One major tip that I would give if you're going to consider applying for a work study is apply for a lot of them, but also before applying for them, contact the professor directly and say, is this position available? And also sort of express interest, because a lot of the time, professors will rehire the same students, but in order to do so, they have to make a posting on like the job portal. And so it looks like there's a position when actually there isn't. So save yourself some time, contact professors, plus it has the bonus of like expressing interest so they remember your name when they see your application. Yeah, so that's work study. I've done a work study since my second year, so I've done it for 3 years, where I've been doing just like a lot of different stuff with bees and pollination ecology. Yeah, and another thing that you can do is work as a research assistant. These are usually not advertised, and they're usually just like offered as summer jobs to students who have already been working in a lab. Yeah, and it's usually like on a monthly stipend. These are not as popular, but like some people do them. Oh yeah, and this was the photo underneath the bee here is another EEB student, Martina, whose work study job involved like creating a bunch of CT scans of lizards, which is cool. There's a video of this, of one of these lizard scans that she generously offered to let us put in the presentation. I think it's really cool. Woohoo! I don't know if any of you, I don't know anything about vertebrates, but like if you're a vertebrate person, that's like pretty cool. Yeah, and then another way to do research is on a grant or scholarship. So these are like really, really great because you have to apply to them, but like you get paid for them. And in some cases, they can be combined with research courses. So you can get like money and also course credit for doing the research. There's various different awards you can apply for. The most popular one is NSERC, but that's only available to domestic students. But for international students, you can also apply to the U of T Excellence Award, which is that has like a GPA cutoff. But there's also the KSR Award for field research at U of T's field station, and the Undergrad Research Fund and the Laidlaw Scholarship. And so some of these are offered through EEB, some are offered through Arts and Science. Yeah, so we have some links on here. And just some last things. So like one of the, I think, most difficult things about research, especially for like these kind of positions that aren't advertised, is like, how do you find these opportunities? Like, how do you contact a professor? Like, honestly, just, I don't know, it's good to just contact people. I think the most valuable piece of information I've learned is that like all of my profs are kind of nerds, you know, they're like people who want to, in a really good way, they're people who want to talk about their research because they're interested in it. And they're people who want to like, I don't know, they want to help out students who are also interested in the topics that they're working on. So one good way to just sort of explore like what different researchers at U of T are doing is just on the EEB website on the research page. You can see like all of the different labs, and you can sort them by like different categories, and it'll link to their websites. So you can see like what kind of research they're actively doing. Yeah, website is a great resource for that. Yeah, we can talk a lot about this later, about like our personal tips for contacting professors and like how we each ended up doing the work that we're doing. Just like generally, I think when you're talking to professors about research opportunities, it's really good to emphasize your interest and your like enthusiasm, that you're like, this is a topic I really want to learn more about, and I'm committed to doing work on it if you want to work together on it. I think that's really important to emphasize. I personally have like never had professors ask me about my GPA when I've applied to positions. I know that some EEB profs have, but I've never like included a transcript when contacting profs, and like I've never had anyone ask for it. So that's like another thing. If like your transcript isn't super impressive, you can just not include it if you don't want to. Yeah, and then at the end of this presentation, we also have like a sample email. If you're like really just like, I need something to start off of, feel free to use this as a little guide. Yeah, and all this is available somewhere. Yeah.
Thank you, Sydney. Why don't we start with you then? Let's introduce yourself, and then we'll introduce the rest of the panelists. So yeah, you start since you're already unmuted.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so as I said, I'm Sydney. She, her pronouns are good. I am in my 4th year in EEB doing EEB specialist and a genome biology major. Just quick, like the research that I've done, I started volunteering in my 1st year in the Weiss lab. That was a lot of like repetitive counting flowers. It was a position that was advertised on the Bio 120 webpage, but I really enjoyed it. And then in my 2nd year, I started doing a work study with James Thompson, who's now retired, doing stuff with bees and pollination ecology. And then in the summer after my 2nd year, I did an EEB 397 independent research course with Jean-Marc Moncalvo at the ROM. And so that was where I was collecting a lot of mushrooms. And then I continued that research in my 3rd year in a 498 project. So it was like the same independent research. And then this year, I'm doing a 499 independent research project with Marla Sokolowski. It's like fruit fly genetics type stuff. Yeah, so I've done like a whole lot of different research areas and stuff. They've all been really fun.
Thank you, Sydney. Jessie, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessie. I'm in my 3rd year. I'm doing a double major in EEB and molecular genetics. Previously, I've volunteered and worked on projects involving Medicago and Rhizobia mutualisms, as well as a project working with Daphnia or water fleas. And then in my 2nd year, I did both a work study and a 299 with the Weiss Lab for my 299, which was a lot of counting seeds and then a bit of data analysis. And then at the end of my 2nd year, I contacted Professor Stinchcombe because I was interested in applying for some summer research opportunities. And I was very fortunate to receive the KSR Research Award, which due to COVID, unfortunately ended up being remote. But currently I'm doing a 397, working with Medicago and Rhizobia and fungi and tripartite mutualism.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessie. Claudia, you can go next.
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Claudia. I'm a fourth year conservation biology and environmental science major. My research experience has been very similar to Sydney, except for instead of non-vertebrates, I have done a lot of things with vertebrates. And so I started as a work study student in Helen Rod's lab, where I was feeding guppies, and I was doing that for a while. And then from that experience, I applied to the REP program, so the Research Excursion Program, to do fieldwork in Algonquin Provincial Park. But I didn't end up getting that position, but because I had a strong reference from Helen Rod, Niall Rawlinson, the professor who was running that program, ended up taking me on as a volunteer. So I still got to do field work in with turtles and salamanders, which was really, really cool. And so from that experience, I ended up doing a 397 project on turtle vocalizations because I did have that connection with Niall, and he was willing to take me on as a research project student. And then from that, just this past summer, I ended up doing a 498 project, again with the same supervisor, so Niall, but this time it was remote work with a lot of data and a lot of data that was already collected. This was mostly because of the pandemic and the fact that you couldn't be on campus. And then currently I am doing a 499 project, thesis project, working with Marie-Josée Fulton and Niall Rawlinson again, where I'm looking at Ontario's herpetile fauna and how that overlaps with protected areas across Southern Ontario.
Thank you, Claudia. Sarah, can we have you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah. I'm in fourth year and I'm doing an EEB specialist. And I guess my research career at EEB started with volunteering in my first and second year. And so I volunteered in the Frederickson and then the Weiss lab. And then in the summer after my second year, I did the field course at Koffler Scientific Reserve. So that was a field course in temperate field ecology, I believe. And that was super fun. I really recommend it. I know it's not being offered this summer, but if you're still around, I would definitely try and go for that. Yeah, and then in my third year, I did an ROP project in the Weiss lab again. And this year I'm doing a fourth year project, which kind of like spiraled off from my third year project. And I'm looking at seed longevity and how this applies to studies of evolution and being able to measure things like adaptation of flowering time in response to climate change, and how this relates to storing seeds in seed banks. And then I'm also doing a work study with a grad student who's in the Rowe lab and in the Muller lab. And we're doing a project on pheromone diversity in insects, which is really fun as well. So.
Thank you, Sarah. Natasha?
Hi, everyone. I'm Natasha. I am a fourth year EEB specialist and a minor in environmental science. I use she, her pronouns. I'm not someone that like always wanted to do biology. So I think for me, research experience really pushed me in that direction. And that's why I'm kind of such a proponent of it. So I started off doing an internship at the Rocky Mountain Biolab. So this was with James Thompson, and I was looking at invasive mustards in Colorado. And that was just like incredible. And I was like, oh my God, research is awesome. Science is awesome. And it was just the best. And so I kind of just tried to find every possible research experience after that to get that high, if you will. So I did an ROP 299 with Chelsea Rothman, and that was looking at microplastics in agricultural runoff. And so from there, that's when I kind of got into agriculture, and then coupled with my kind of experience with plants in Colorado, those two kind of combined, and that has very much shaped the last half of my degree. I also did a summer abroad field course in Ecuador. So feel free to ask me about that. I know that they're running it online this year, but that was also wonderful. And if you are kind of in an earlier year, I definitely recommend trying for that. I did the OUPFB program at Laurentian University. So that was kind of my like, am I sure I want to work with plants? So I worked with fish. I did fish surveys in Northern Ontario, and I definitely preferred plants. So that's just an indicator that it's okay to try different things and to do things you're scared of. I had never even like taken a course on fish. I had no clue what I was doing, but I learned how. I'm also a terrible swimmer, but it was a great time. It worked out, and I kind of learned a lot about myself. And it was really fun meeting like different faculty and different grad students and just seeing how other universities operate. So I would definitely recommend that. And then I did a CGCS with Shelby Riskin, and that was kind of where I approached her. And I said, I really like plastic, I really like plants, I like agriculture, and it wasn't quite in her wheelhouse, but we ended up kind of doing a collaboration with me, her, and Chelsea Rockman. And so that's another thing where it's okay to combine your research interests and reach out to several profs. They all know each other. They're all across the hall from each other. You know, they know each other. They talk to each other. And now I'm doing a 498, which is more of the same, but I'm working in the greenhouse. Whereas in the summer, when everything went online, I worked in my backyard.
Thank you, Natasha. And finally, last but not least, Zifang.
Hi everyone, I'm Zifang and I'm currently a fourth year EEB student and I am in the EEB specialist program. So my very first research experience was the research excursion program where I went with Professor Mahler to Ecuador and to do ecological survey on the Anolis lizard communities. It was like this dream position for me because you get to go to the tropical forest and you get to see lizards and sometimes catch lizards. And it was this wonderful experience. And then after that, when I got back, I applied for a work study position in the Mahler lab and was working on photographing the lizard specimens in the lab and also help with the CT scan reconstruction. And I wanted to have a similar field experience again, so I applied for the NSERC USRA, which is the Undergraduate Student Research Award, hoping to go again to Ecuador. But due to the pandemic, the plan was, changed. And so this summer, with the USRA scholarship, I work on a Anolis lizard dentition project where I used all those CT head scans that Sydney showed you earlier and look at their teeth and trying to see if there are any specializations in the teeth. And then this project got extended into a EEB 498 research project, which I'm currently working on. So I did have a little bit of diversity in the programs. I dab into different programs, but in terms of supervisor, I haven't always been working with the same one. So not so much diversity in terms of that.
Thank you, Zifang. All right, so everyone, you've met all our wonderful panelists. So we can open up to questions now. I'll give everyone the audience members, some time to come up with your questions. Put them in the chat box and I will moderate and ask the panelists so the panelists don't get overwhelmed with scrolling and keeping track of everything. So everyone take a minute, type in your questions, and for panelists, chime in if you want to answer the question or you have something to say. Okay, and sometimes there's going to be administrative questions that I can probably answer in the chat, like due dates and things like that. Oh, okay, they're coming in. All right, this one is specifically for Natasha. From an undecided first year, what do you like about environmental science minor?
So I actually started off at U of T with an environmental science major and an EEB major. I've switched around probably every year. I dropped the EEB major because I didn't want to take genetics. And so I did an environmental biology major. Yes, that's true. I was that scared of genetics. And then I was like, okay, wait, genetics is really useful. It kept coming up in my classes. And I'm like, okay, fine. And then I had a bunch of conflicts with classes. So I ended up doing an EEB specialist and environmental science minor. So I guess that's a good lesson in don't feel super locked in what you pick right now. If you're kind of generally within this area, you can move around. What I liked about it was that if you're someone who doesn't just like biology, if you like chemistry, if you like physics, like the way that I did, I think it's a really great option for you, especially coupled with an EEB major or even coupled with some other major, like a chem major or something. It's a really nice exposure to different areas. I will say that it prepares you a little bit more for kind of like being a field tech, maybe working in industry. It's kind of a different direction than EEB tends to kind of groom you. I felt that with EEB courses, they are kind of grooming you a little more for academia. Maybe other people have felt differently, but that's been my experience. So yeah.
I agree with that. I'm an environmental science major, so instead of a minor, I'm like, it's a larger course load of environmental courses, but it definitely varies your learning experience and like different perspectives, like Natasha said. It's a lot in the courses that you want to take.
Thank you. There was a question here that I want to read, but it's getting a little. Oh, any tips for getting academic references when you're applying for your first research experience? Or what kind of information would you include if you're just trying to get in there? How would you introduce yourself to profs?
I can go for this one because I didn't really talk about like how I got contact with the profs that I've worked with. When I did my first independent research project, so like the summer 397, I was like, I really want to work with fungi. And there's one prof in EEB who works on fungi. I've never met him before. I've never seen the guy. I don't know like where he is or what he does. But I was just like, I'm just gonna cold email him and be like, please let me, I don't know, like I'm really interested in your research. And we just like had a meeting and talked about it, and that was it. And I guess the thing, like the first time that you do research, like having references is good, but I think just like showing up and showing enthusiasm and showing interest, knowing what they work on, having like questions and ideas about their area of expertise, like I think that'll get you further than references for these kind of things. Although I think you do need references for like things that you apply to, like the scholarships perhaps. But yeah, just like positions and stuff, I think it's not super common to have references. I don't know. Have any of you guys like applied to stuff where you've had references?
When I first started with my work study, I offered to give references. So I ended up getting an interview, and I offered like, do you want references? And then Helen, who was hiring me, was like, oh yes, please send me any references you have that I could contact. And so I ended up using my boss from like a summer camp job, and I used him as a reference, and he gave such a great reference that she was willing to take me on, because it's really just about work ethic. It's not only about whether you can do research. It's about, are you reliable? Are you able to do the job?
Thank you. This one's coming up quite a bit. What kind of work does volunteering or work study research or research projects, what does that look like during the pandemic? Working remotely and doing a project not in a lab.
I can answer this one. So the work study was included. Originally, the work study was including anolis lizard photographing the lizard specimens, and also working on a machine in the lab to work on the CT scan specimens. But due to the pandemic, because photographing the lizard required 2 persons, so that part got cut off when the pandemic hit. And well, all of the work study students switch online to remotely connect into the lab computer to work on the CT scan specimens. So that part is able to move online, depending on which lab you're in and what professor you're working with. They may or may not have projects that can be done online.
One thing that I noticed with research projects and remote work is that now professors are now going into their large databases that they have. So you're dealing with a lot more data and a lot more data analysis, which can be really intimidating and scary. And honestly, like it can be daunting, but professors understand that you know, second year or third year or even like fourth year students don't know much about data analysis, and so they will help you out. And I think, you know, going into those long-term data sets provides like really unique results because you're not collecting the data, you can spend more time analyzing it. So it's a different, yeah, it's a different work process, but it's still really rewarding and super interesting.
Okay, thank you. There's a question here. If we are interested in getting involved in a research project course, how far in advance should we start reaching out to a prof?
I mean, I personally, when I first was contacting that prof who I had never met before about to just like cold ask him to supervise me on a project, I contacted him like really far in advance. Like it was for a summer project. I think I contacted him in like February or March, although like that's totally not necessary, I think. Like for my other research project, I basically figured it out like a month before the application stuff was due. I don't know, it depends. But I think it definitely helps, like, if it's a professor that you've never met before, who you just like read about online and it's someone who you think you want to work with, like doing it earlier, even if it's just saying like, hey, like, I'm really interested in the kind of research you do. Like, I have questions about it. I'm maybe interested in working in this field. Like, could we, I don't know, could we meet? Could we talk? You know? I think that's beneficial for that. Like, I don't know, earlier.
I think the earlier is better too, because sometimes popular, I mean, just as an admit in the office, there are some profs that are more popular than others or are busier than others or who have other plans. So if there's someone that you really want to work with, they might have already gotten, not that it's a first come, first serve, but they might have already promised to or made a commitment to a student to take that student on. And then, so if you get that, so that's why the advice is to get in earlier. But obviously they will take whoever is a better fit. But there are, and I think another thing, I haven't done a research project, but some profs are more active in different times. So like summertime is crazy. Like there's a lot more opportunities, I think, or things to go abroad. Like I guess Professor Mahler and Rollins did, and I think Chelsea Rockman has more summer type things. But I think the earlier is the better. I'm rambling now.
Also to add to that, also to add to that, if you say you're in, for example, second year and you want to do a third year project next year, like there's nothing wrong with contacting them now and not necessarily saying, I want to do a course project with you, but just saying, oh, I'm interested and I want to help out in the lab, and then working for a month or two or even longer with, for example, a grad student or whatever opportunities they have available. And then because they'll know your face, they'll know how interested you are, your work ethic, they're much more likely to bring you on a bit later. But then in terms of timeline, like say you already know a prof decently well and you want to do a project, I've always reached out in the summer, maybe like June or early July, but I would probably stick to June because also sometimes profs are really busy. And so you need to send them reminder emails just to say like, hey, can you fill out this application? Hey, I need your signature for this. So yeah, like always earlier is better.
For fall projects, I've usually emailed in March or April. And that was mostly because you still have an opportunity to meet them in person, just because the summer, like you don't know who's going to be on campus. But I guess remotely, April is a good timeline. But if you want to do summer projects, now would be a good time. Like now is definitely prime time to email for summer projects.
Someone had a question, how many work hours a week do these generally involve? But I don't, oh, sorry. I guess depending on each kind of opportunity. So for those of you who did a work study or volunteering, like how many hours is that versus a ROP and a project course?
I can talk to that. So when I did a work study, I think the limit is 15 hours a week, and then there's how many hours in a semester or through the entire period. But I found I usually ended up working about 10 hours a week, and it was very flexible. Volunteering, it really varied. Like it would go from like maybe like 1 or 2 hours a week to sometimes I would have like 5 to 6 hours. So it really depends. And then when you're doing a project, it also depends on what your project is and how much like prep do you have to do, how often do you have to go in to check on the organism you're studying. So like currently, like my project involves a lot of like autoclaving and prep work, which takes time. So I've ended up being in the lab for like 15 to 20, sometimes 25 hours in a week, but then other times it slows down. So it really depends.
Yeah, it's pretty variable. It depends. I find it depends per position. So some professors want you to come in on a consistent basis. And so maybe you'll do a consistent amount, like 6 hours a week, just because that's the way the schedule works, or you're waiting for a piece of equipment to be available. And then in other positions, it's really on your own time. So that's where time management becomes really important, and, really communicating with your supervisor about, this is how much you're going to work, or this is what you're going to do. In terms of independent research projects, just because those can be like really variable, I've spent, depending on like how much work I want to get done within a week, I've spent up to like 8 hours in a week. And then I've also spent like 3 hours because I just had a lot of other commitments at that time. Yeah, it's a lot about time management, but also communicating with your supervisor.
I just want to add on as well. Obviously now, since there are some caps on how many people can be in the lab or in a space, so some things might end up taking longer because normally you would have like volunteers or work studies or other people helping you.
Just to speak to Jacqueline's question a little bit. So when I did my ROP 299, I did have like 4 courses and then my ROP on top. I was okay mainly because of the nature of my project. It was very much I could come in whenever I wanted to. So like Claudia was saying, sometimes I would not come in that entire week and then the next week do 20 hours if that was what worked for me. It really depends on what you're working with. It depends on your study organism. But I will say that remember that it's not a typical course where you have to study after, and kind of sometimes it's like you do those 10 hours and then that's it. It is kind of crunch time when it comes like March, when you're doing like aggressive data analysis and writing your paper and your poster, and that's when it becomes a little heavier. But for most of the year, it's kind of a nice mental break not to just be in a lecture and studying. Like I will say that a lot of podcast time for me personally.
Yeah, and also like I feel more like ownership of the course than I would like a lecture course, because I'm like, this is like my thing. It's like I'm creating a thing. I don't know, like it was, I would do about 10 hours a week, but it was also like, it felt like creative time. It felt like I was doing something I was interested in, and like very self-directed, hands-on type stuff. So it definitely kept me busy, but it didn't like interfere with my other courses when I was doing a full course load.
Thank you. We have a question here from Haley. When we're reaching out to a prof for a project course like 498, should we include our resume and cover letter in the first email, or is it better to just express interest in working with them and ask for a chance to chat? It's like dating. I don't know.
I'd say you should attach at least your resume, because I feel like the cover letter information, just leave it in the email so they don't have to look at another document. But the resume is good because they get an overview of your experiences, and that'll be something that they can ask you about. And as well, I think it's always better to just provide it so they don't have to ask you for it, because it's just another email, another back and forth.
I've always included so cover letter, I would always include as an email. So my cover letter becomes the email. But I've always included my resume and transcript just because it shows, if they're interested, they can reference it and look at it and see if I'm fit for their lab. I know Sydney mentioned including a transcript, but I've always liked to include it just because the positions I usually apply to are profs who want students who know statistics, or they want students who can work on like more computation side of things. And so I've just found that your transcript can help, just so that it shows your background in like knowledge or experience. Yeah.
I think maybe like, just in case anybody had the experience that I had of like doing really, really badly in first year chem and calc, if you don't want your GPA out there, I think an alternative to that would be to just like list relevant courses that you've taken. And, you know, maybe if you did really well in certain courses that are relevant to the position you're applying for, like say, oh, I got an A or a B in this course. Yeah, just in case you don't want to throw your whole transcript up there.
Yeah, if your transcript's not the best, definitely don't include it. But if you think it's a good transcript, like definitely include it. Like it will help. But yeah, don't shoot yourself in the foot if you think it's not the best.
Yeah, I've never included my transcript, but I have done the course thing where I've listed the courses that I've taken that might be relevant. And then what I also found was useful was like you can get an A in a course and not really understand the material or forget it right afterwards, but including like a brief summary or even like one sentence of like relevant skills that you learned. Like I did that for my work study. I listed the courses and then I said like in this course, I learned how to do like these kind of statistics. And I think like the grad student who was doing the hiring, she said that was really useful to her. So.
Thank you, everyone. I have a few questions about just people who just want to get their foot in the door by volunteering, first-time experience. What are some tips to getting in there? And also keeping in mind it's pandemic, undergrad research or undergrad volunteering is probably not going to be the first priority to do something in person. So are there any have you seen any virtual volunteering positions available out there from your experience? I think Sydney was collecting some.
Yeah. One thing, so I'm in the EEB course union, and one thing that we were trying to do was getting professors to like, if they had volunteer opportunities, to like let us know so we could send these out to undergrads. We didn't get a whole lot of responses to this, but the thing is that like, I don't know, I think a lot of profs just aren't thinking in terms of creating volunteer opportunities, but there pretty much are always these opportunities to at least get a foot in the door or get involved in labs. One really good way to do this is to just ask if you can attend their lab meetings or attend their journal club. I know that there are a lot of labs on campus that are happy to let students join the lab meetings. Lab meetings are just when, you know, like the PhD students, the grad students, the undergrads will discuss their research. Sometimes they'll give presentations on it. You kind of talk about methods and things like that. It's a really good way to learn about how research works and also just to meet people and see what they're working on. So I would recommend that, just because it seems like there are not a whole lot of like volunteer opportunities that are at least like being overtly advertised. Just contact labs you're interested in, see if you can sit in on their lab meetings.
Also, another way to get your foot in the door is talking to your TAs. I found that super useful. So either your TA will be able to help you incorporate like your help into their own work, especially because they know you from the classes. So it's sort of like a more direct connection than just cold calling or cold emailing a prof. But then also I've had TAs who have helped me like contact other grad students that they know in different fields that I was interested in. But yeah, like your TAs for the most part, they're always super helpful. So that's also a good way to get in.
I also, I think sometimes the work study positions and volunteering positions are assisting grad students with their projects. So approaching a TA from your EEB course, thank you, Sarah, for mentioning that, is also a great way to get your foot in the door, and talking about what you're interested in with that TA could lead you to another grad student in the department in which your research interest aligns. So it could be helping like that particular grad PhD student with their data or whatever. That's kind of where it starts. Sometimes you're not even helping the PI themselves with their thing. You're watering the grad students' plants or something. So that's what I've heard from students before.
I also know a lot of people who have started research in the thesis course. So they didn't have a background in volunteering or work study. They got a research position by just contacting professors and indicating their interest and connecting kind of what they've learned to what they want to do in their lab, or why the research interests them. So you don't necessarily need volunteer experience or work studies experience, although it does help.
Yes, thank you, Claudia, for mentioning that. I know everyone on the panel has very extensive experience starting from when they were maybe in their first year sometimes, but I have had students in the past on the panel who started that year, and they were doing a 498, and they just said, they emailed the prof and said, I'll do anything. Like, I'll count the fruit flies. And like, it's just showing your passion. It's never too late. That was also what a lot of past undergrads have told me, like, that you don't have to start when you're in the 12th grade coming into your first year. It's okay. It really is fine if you didn't count the seeds or feed the fish or anything like that. Just wanted to add that. Okay, someone is, okay, so
I would also add.
Go ahead, Natasha, sorry.
It's okay, don't worry. I would also add that, especially for students who aren't in first year, going to the office hours in your EEB classes, I cannot recommend this higher. You might be scared, you might think it's awkward. Like, I would have never gone to Colorado if I hadn't lived in that office. At the end of the day, it's a big class, and I get that. But you will learn so much. It's such a great way to meet the prof. It's such a great way to just get outside the class, learn about what they do, learn if it might interest you. Also, if you don't know this by now, EEB is obsessed with Twitter. I don't know why, but it's the thing. So find the profs that you're interested in, follow them on Twitter. They post their publications. Sometimes they even post like, we're looking for a volunteer. They won't post it on a job board, but they'll put it on Twitter. So that's also another great place to look.
Yeah, I want to also second that. Like, EEB Twitter is like so on it. I got a Twitter just to like follow different labs in the field that I'm interested in, and it's great because I see like, you know, recent papers on topics that I'm interested in, and then I like go to lab and I'm talking to like my PI and I'm like, did you see this paper that was just published? And they're like, no, I didn't. I'm like, well, I did. Twitter is really great for people who are interested in research.
Yeah, I cannot emphasize more on that. Sometimes you'll be surprised how active profs are on Twitter.
I have a question here about volunteering or working with profs at UTSC or UTM. So I know this is kind of confusing because when you go to the EEB website, there are UTM and UTSC profs listed there, but it's an administrative thing, meaning the grad program at the EEB grad program is tri-campus. So that means it involves all three campuses, but the the undergrad program is St. George separated by UTSC, UTM. So the UTSC and UTM profs are not profs for the undergrad program. I guess if you want to volunteer with one of a UTSC or UTM prof, I guess you can do that if they want to take you on and the research aligns with you, with your interests. It's up to you, I guess, to contact them. But for work study, I think that's complicated. I don't know the answer to that. I'm pretty sure it goes by campus because you're going to be getting paid.
I've had work study. I've had work studies like in my lab who came from Scarborough or who came from UTM. And so I know it's possible. I just know that it's difficult because you're commuting to another campus.
Travel,
yeah. So,
yes. I was that's why I was trying to say, like, if it works
Yeah.
for you, I guess. But I guess with the virtual thing, it might be different. You would probably have to look, like the UTM and the UTSC prof is probably posting on for work study there. As for researching though, the UTSG, like the undergrad program is St. George. So usually it has to be a prof from our campus. We also allow adjunct professors. That word is very hard for me, but which we have a few of those that are doing pretty cool research, but they're just not like a faculty member. They're doing research elsewhere. I hope that answers your question. Oh, how important is it to know stat tools like R?
Oh, I have so much experience with this. Oh my God. When so in conservation biology, it's all data. Oh, it's crazy how much stats. So I came in as a third-year student knowing absolutely none. I took general stats. I didn't even take biostats. So I had absolutely no experience of R. But thankfully, I was able to learn R through the research project. And so Niall was very understanding that I didn't have a background in stats. And so he like helped me, he taught me how to like use R, how to analyze data. I also took additional R courses. So some courses teach you R, and so it helps you along. But yeah, I wouldn't be worried because professors understand that students don't know stats. But yeah, take EEB 313. It's a really good course. And this summer, I didn't know much about stats, and I did a bunch of data analysis with a large data set, and it was basically me and Niall figuring out how to do stats because even he didn't know how to do some of the analyses we're trying to do. So it's a lot of communicating with your supervisor, and I wouldn't worry too much about not knowing everything there is to know about stats.
I'll also throw in, me and Claudia have talked about this before. I've had the exact opposite experience where like all three of the profs I've worked with, none of them even know how to use R. There has been like no expectation that any of my research projects do stats that are more complicated than like a percent, you know? And so it just depends. But like, I think another side of this is like, if you're in conservation, it's good to know stats. If you're in like a genetics or CSB genome bio program, it's really helpful to know like different bioinformatic analyses. There are really good courses for this in CSB that I would highly recommend if you're interested in anything related to like working with DNA or phylogenetics or like taxonomy type work. It's really good to know bioinformatic stuff.
And profs usually don't have very high, I mean, they won't expect you to come in as an R expert or anything like that. For me, I started with 0 R experiences and just learned through the way. And I was taking this R course when I'm doing my project. And most of my project involves using R to do data manipulation analysis, not manipulation, data management or processing and analyses. So yes, it's definitely a very good tool set you need to you want to have if you want to do EEB research, and don't be daunted by if you just get into programming, because it's a lot of self-learning process and a lot of Googling, and it'll get better with experience. So don't be afraid to dabble into it.
Yeah, there's also tons of resources like on the internet. You can even just find like free courses that will take you through definitely the intro and even like more complicated things in R, as well as EEB 313. I took that in 3rd year and it was super useful. But yeah, it's sort of like learn as you go experience, and your profs will be like very happy to help you if you need it. So
thank you, everyone. It seems like the questions have slowed down. If anybody, I know we're already at 1 o'clock, so if you have to go, you can go. Thank you for attending. But if anyone has any questions, if there are some panelists that can stay for maybe 10 minutes or something, if there's any extra questions, I'm just going to drop in the chat box a few the links again. And you can email me anytime, undergrad@eb.eeb, if you have any questions. I know there are summer research award opportunities, and we haven't received all that information yet from the powers that be. So that information, as soon as it comes down the pipeline, we are going to get it out to students as fast as we can. I know that's on people's minds. I mentioned this in the chat also, but field courses in the summer 2021 are unfortunately not being offered because of everything that is happening in the world. Hopefully when things get back to normal, we can offer experiences like that again. There were a few questions about what are the chances of in-person experiences happening, like research experiences happening, not experiences, like getting into the lab in the summer. I don't know for sure. I don't know anything. Yeah, I am not a fortune teller, so I don't know, but I'm gonna say unlikely. And there is a protocol from Central Research about like profs have to fill out a bunch of stuff in order to get somebody allowed inside the building and access to the building. So it has to be dire or like it has to be a really good reason for somebody to get permission to come into the building. So I'm not trying to be a glass half empty person, but I don't think like an undergrad volunteer position would make the cut. So, I mean, I just wish everyone, I know it's hard times, and thank you for coming out, everyone, the panelists, everyone's giving you guys all kudos. So thank you for sharing all your experiences and your great tips for everyone. Hopefully things will get better in the future if some of the attendees are in their second or first year. Things will get a bit better later on for them. I did record the session, but I don't know what it's going to look like because it's my first time recording a Zoom session, so I'll try to edit it nicely. And I'll send that out to the listserv and on social media when it's available. Everyone says thank you. So thank you, Claudia, Sarah, Natasha, Zifang, Sydney, Jesse. Did I get everyone? Yes. And to all the people who attended, we hope it was helpful. And again, email us or let us know if you have any questions. I was just scared that I was on mute the whole time talking, but I wasn't. Any last tips, anyone, before we're leaving?
Also, like, don't
Yes.
hesitate to email the EEB course union. Also definitely like email Amy in the office, but like if you have more of just like an informal question and you want to ask about like, hey, like, what's your experience with this course? Or like, is this prof nice? Like, email the EEB course union. I'll send the email in here. Like, it's just a bunch of undergrads who are like so happy to answer these kind of questions and like chat with people. And
yeah. The Discord.
And the Discord, yeah.
Too. Yeah.
I can post the link again.
Yeah, sometimes when I get questions about what is a course like or what is it like to do a research course, I can ask administratively, but I don't know what it's really like. So I do send those over to Cindy and her team, and they're very keen and helpful to provide all that information. It's a very good group. Oh, and is there a design competition? You want to plug that in?
Yeah, there's a design competition. The info is on the EEB Union Facebook, but yeah, it's a design competition for the EEB apparel this year. I don't remember when the due date is. Let me, yeah, follow
I think it's tomorrow.
It's tomorrow, oh God.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, if you don't want to design anything, you can vote for it soon.